3, 2, 1.
Welcome in Life on the Red podcast. I'm Chris. There's Parker. There's Steve. It's 4:49 p.m. September 29th, 2021. We are 3 days away from Nebraska hosting Northwestern. Little 6:30 p.m. banger over at Memorial Stadium. Prime time. I can't imagine two better teams to put in prime time national television college football than Nebraska and Northwestern. Two explosive offenses.
Yeah.
Two teams that play at a high level.
It's going to be pretty much like the Pac-12 after dark.
Yeah, exactly. We got a lot to get to, so let's get right into it. And we're going to start with Nebraska because really what isn't there to talk about with Nebraska? We're going to talk O-line. We're going to talk punter. We're going to talk all kinds of stuff. Let's start with the O-line. It sounds like things are going to get shaken up this week. Scott Frost alluded to it on Monday at his press conference. We need to find a left guard. We need to play better at right tackle. So it seems pretty clear changes are coming there. I guess just overall, I'll start with either one of you guys and open it up. What did you see from the O-line Saturday? What needs to happen for them to take a step forward against Northwestern?
Oh my God.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Sept. Parker, you're up.
Yeah.
Come on. Just a layman's take. Offensive line discussions are interesting to me because the nature of them. We don't know exactly what they're being asked to do on a play-to-play basis.
Block the opponent, I think, is the general.
Yeah. You're not. One thing, like, I guess an expert would say they almost move to the second level seemingly really quickly. They don't, like on their double team blocks, they don't hold them very long.
Too quickly. Yeah.
They don't hold them very long. Then then you frequently see them kind of looking back, like, oh, what just happened? Like they're kind of anxious to get to the smaller guy, the linebacker and block them. That's one thing. The pass pro is listen, statistically, their tackles are about the worst in the nation in pass pro. It's the best way to describe the pass pro is it's sort of historically bad at a place that didn't pass pro for a long time. They didn't. I was talking to Dom Raiola, Dave Remington. They didn't even really pass pro at Nebraska back then. So it's a little different conversation. But since Nebraska's been winging the ball around since 2004, I haven't seen this kind of pass pro before. This kind of pass pro, which involves just kind of letting the guy go back past you to the quarterback. It's an interesting way to pass pro.
Not ideal.
It certainly is.
There's a couple things. Frost has made two sort of quips in the past few days that I think sort of speak to the frustration on the protection angle. One, he said of Nebraska, he said, we've got one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the country, and he got sacked 7 times against Michigan State. So
that was a quip.
And it also was a quip when he said, we can't be in our quick passing game on the first play of the game and get sacked in half a second. That's what happened. It was Martinez had got to the top of a 3-step drop and got hit by a guy who came off the right edge and really without much resistance. So that's if you look at Pro Football Focus data, Nebraska dropped back to pass 49 times against Michigan State and got pressured 28 times. They've been pressured 63 times in 110 dropbacks over the past 3 weeks. So more than
13 blitzes.
Yeah. So that's the rub right there. They're getting pressured 55 to 60% of the time that Adrian Martinez drops back, and teams are blitzing 13% of the time, so you can't have a consistently functional offense at that rate. And then that's before, Frost also said that they need to sort of, like simply you're saying, they need to get more vertical movement on the offensive line. He said, I'd rather have a guy whiff entirely at this point than just engage a guy and have a wall at the line of scrimmage. So we're going to see what it looks like. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more about what it might look like. But there's I think there was a sense early in the year that the group might just sort of be settling in. But that turned pretty quickly, I think, over the last 2 weeks, especially against some talented rushers from Oklahoma and Michigan State, to a sense that, man, the group's just hasn't played anywhere near well enough so far.
Yeah, and I don't like to be snarky about a group of guys that are. I don't think effort is an issue. I
Right.
think they're trying, and I don't like to do that. I sure don't want to single out anybody, or at least I hope I don't do that. But they're not. I mean, come on. Frost said what he said on Monday, which is paraphrasing. They're essentially dragging back the whole operation right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Frost is, I'm just sort of paraphrasing what Frost has said there. So,
Yeah, I think
it's hard to watch.
Yeah, simple. I mean, I think one of the things that is just sort of, it's not the pro game. These kids, these guys aren't professional athletes. And so there's
really.
There's a lot of benefit of the doubt, given to players. And that's great. I mean, like you say, effort is not an issue, but I just, at some level, like, Bryce Bennett might get benched this week. That's the reality of the situation, is that they don't think he's played well enough, and he might get benched. They've tried 2 guys at left guard. They don't think either of them have played well enough. And it's sort of like Frost said on Monday, like, that's not a death sentence. That's not the end of a guy's career. Hardly. They really like Bryce Bennett. They think he's got the potential to be a really good player, and it might help. It might help to watch for a little bit, and that's what Frost said. Frost talked about getting benched for part of a game when he was a senior. He talked about benching Adrian Martinez last year. It worked with Lamar Jackson, although that was more about discipline than it was about, fundamentals and technique. But at some level, it's a conversation because it's real, and it's probably going to look different for Nebraska on Saturday, and we'll see if that pays off. I thought it was interesting. Sipple, we were talking on Monday. It's just not that common to see this happen in the middle of the season, that this is the time where you just go back to the drawing board on it. I mean, maybe coming out of a bye week or something like that, but it says something that Nebraska is going to go to potentially a pretty radical approach here. And it's not spring ball. It's not August. We're 5 games into a 12-game season.
Right. It happens.
Well,
it does. Go ahead, Baz. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't it time for something radical, though? Look, I haven't done anything on offense. They haven't done anything. They basically played Buffalo to a stalemate on the offensive line. And Buffalo's a fine team, but congrats. You struggled to get any push against Fordham until the second half, and you've already just detailed what's happened against power conference opponents. Like, you got to do something. And you got to do this season has been radically bad for Nebraska in a lot of ways. Some obvious and some not. So I'm okay with doing something radical. And like you said, we'll get into that a little more later. And it is unusual, but at the same time, you got to do something. You can't keep doing what you're doing. It's not working.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I do think you're right. And I like what Parker said and what Frost said. It doesn't have to be a death sentence for anybody. And you mentioned Adrian, and that's a shining example. At that point, when he got benched last year for Penn State, you wondered where his career would go. Maybe that was going to be it at Nebraska. That definitely went through people's minds. But Adrian, of course, being Adrian Martinez, responded like a champion. And I'll never forget when he came in against Illinois late in that game, how well he handled it. He looked really good on
great.
His drive.
Yeah.
And then, he took over the position again and had a strong final 4 games. And those guys who are about to get benched can definitely look at that and say, look what our quarterback, look what happened to our quarterback. So,
this is sorry, Sip, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yes.
I was actually just going to segue into our hot topic, because I thought that was a good place to
do it,
to segue into it.
Yes,
and I'll open it up to you guys first. So I'll open it up to the experts. On Saturday, who are the 5 when Nebraska's offense trots out there for the first time? Who are the 5 offensive linemen you're most intrigued to see together when Nebraska's offense lines up?
Go ahead, Parker. We'll see how much different we are here.
Yeah, well, I think I don't know who it's going to be, but I'll say this might be a little bit more change than what they'll ultimately go with. But the five, I guess I'd be most intrigued to see would be Teddy Prohaska, the freshman at left tackle. Let's say Turner Corcoran then flipping over to right tackle, but I could also see him at left guard. But in this situation, let's say Prohaska at left tackle, Corcoran at right tackle, Nori Newelli, the sophomore who's originally from Germany, transferred from Colorado State at left guard. And then I think it'd be interesting to see Bryce Bennett slide down a level and play right guard. So that would be that'd be two new starters or three new starters, but 4 guys playing a position that they didn't play last week.
That's exactly the group I was going to say. Exactly. So I don't know what to
sorry.
add. No, that's fine. I'm interested to see Prohaska, what that would look like as a freshman. Again, I imagine Northwestern, I don't know what they have up front, but they're usually pretty good up front. And there'll be some grown men, and I'd like to see what that looks like. I'm imagining Nordy Noelli can't be too far from being ready. I guess moving Corcoran, just flipping him over to the right side could help. He's got to get a lot better. That makes sense. I would almost there's a part of me that, I know this kind of goes against what we're saying, but just to stick with most of the other guys wouldn't alarm me that much. I hope. I mean, what could have happened is they gave everybody an open shot this week, and hopefully the guys that were starting said, "Okay, I'm not giving up my job." That's what I hope happened. And maybe a guy like Bryce Benhart made him think twice a little bit. And maybe Hickson I'd like to think they could make him think twice about making any changes. That's what I'd hope. But I hear you, Baz. Nothing's worked. It's not working. It's not working at a it's not working at a really high level or a really low level, depending on how you want to say it. So I don't know. There's a part of me though that says I just wish those guys that were starting would just say, no, nobody's taking my job. I'm going to have the best week of practice I've ever had. I guess we're going to see though.
Yeah, I like that. I like that take. I'll throw a couple different names at you. How about Grant Banks at right tackle?
Yeah.
I think that's
absolutely.
Absolutely. You talk about benching a guy. Maybe you let Turner Corcoran watch from the sideline. I like Prohaska at left tackle, like you guys said. Newelli at left guard. Maybe Brock Bando. Maybe you throw a Brock Bando out there. At left guard and give him some run. Obviously Cam Jurgens at center doesn't change. I don't think he's played well this year. I like sliding Bennett down at right guard, and then I think Corcoran needs to watch. And Brant Banks is a guy that's played pretty much every position on the line except for center, and has said as much. He says he feels comfortable everywhere. So maybe instead of Newelli and Corcoran, you go Bando and Banks in some form or another out there and run with those guys and see what that looks like. But other than that, I tend to agree with what you guys.
It's interesting. I mean, I talked to some old linemen. Dave Remington said that what a lot of these guys need is more time in the saddle together, because he said they're not picking up stunts very well or games, which it's more than Remington says 2 guys is a stunt, more than 2 guys is a game. And he said they're just not picking that stuff up very well as a group. So I don't know. It's interesting changing in mid-flight because you're kind of messing with chemistry once again, I guess. But what you would probably say is that they're messing with bad chemistry right now.
Well, aren't you messing with chemistry by letting your quarterback get hit 20 times a game?
Yeah, you're messing you're messing with the whole operation at that point.
Yeah.
I asked both Frost and Matt Sichterman this week about exactly that, Sipple, the games, having problems dealing with twisting and stunting and all of that. And Sichterman said the key is you've got to see your work. You've got to communicate and you've got to see your work in front of you. And that's just, we've seen a bunch of times where an offensive lineman, and again, I'm not an expert by any means, but you've got a guy who starts out without somebody in front of them And so he turns fully to help. And then here comes that stunt or twist right, blowing by somebody's back, and so there's communication to be had there, and to understand that teams are doing that a lot to them. But there's also some technique there, because part of that's, you got to have the ball out on time for sure. But they've just given up so many free runners at the quarterback that you wonder if the communication's on point, then something like the chemistry and the communication, if all of that is operating at an acceptable level, then something's really wrong technique wise, because it's not translating to them picking that stuff up. So I think one thing to keep in mind, and we'll see if this plays out, but one last thing to keep in mind in all the different ways that pieces can move. A couple of those guys, like Newelly's a good example. Newelly was playing left tackle this spring, sort of before they knew that they thought Prohaska could be in the 2 deep at that spot. So he's played tackle. Bando's played tackle over the course of his career. They've got a bunch of guys. I think we think about that. Brant Banks started a game at left tackle, and then he's played mostly guard since then. So those 3 guys in particular, probably Newelly and Banks more than Bando at this point. You could see either of those guys at right tackle too. You could see Newelly at right tackle and Benhart at right guard or something like that. So it's going to be very intriguing to see how they roll it out on Saturday.
Oh, this stuff is so intriguing. I could talk about it all afternoon. I mean, it's really interesting when you think about, first of all, now, I hate to be always critical of everything, but you'd think you could get this stuff settled in the spring and in 29 practice and off. 29 practice.
You would think, yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of interesting to me. Then the other interesting thing about this conversation is what was happening in August between what we now see as a very good front seven and the offensive line. What were those battles like? Now they were, Ryan Held said these are battles that he said it's quite a show. It's quite a show to watch.
Maybe that show was a little more one-sided.
Yeah.
He was talking about the defense dancing around in the backfield.
It's where it's sort of frustrating not to see any practice, because I would have liked to see what that picture looks like. Now that we know Nebraska's a good front seven, were they dominating this bunch? How much of a concern was it? I don't know. It's fascinating. It's fascinating in a million areas, because was Nebraska running against that group? Were they getting their running game going? You could also, one of the coaches told me was it's hard to judge a running game in this day and age because they don't hit very much in practice. So you don't really know what you got until you start the season. You don't really have a handle on it until you go to Illinois and play, and maybe that lack of success against Illinois surprised the staff. I can't believe they were caught off guard by it, but maybe they were. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's as bad as it's been, you have to think they weren't totally caught off guard.
Well, did August not tell them? Maybe they knew it was going to be this bad. And if they didn't, then what? It's very
there's a whole other set of issues to dive into if they didn't think it would be that bad.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that have been bad, let's talk some punting. Let's talk punting. Let's talk punt return. I'm going to throw a stat at you guys to kick this off. Northwestern is averaging, let me find the number here. Northwestern is averaging 23 yards per punt return this year. Fifth in the country.
Oh, geez.
Oh, boy. Now, think about all the close games Nebraska Northwestern played and how a close game might turn in the opponent's favor when playing Nebraska, as we saw last week. So
perhaps like last year against Northwestern, when a 36-yard punt return set up the score that extended their lead from 1-8.
There you go.
That's no problem. Nebraska just punt away from it.
Yeah, that's fine. No, they're pretty good directional punting. They certainly punt it a direction when they do punt it. It may not be the right one, but again, just an area that's been it's been a disaster. Let's call it what it is. It's been really, really bad. It essentially cost them the game against Michigan State. Now, this is with the caveat that Nebraska's offense has to score more points and not put itself in that position to begin with. But it was bad. And Mike Dawson came out yesterday and basically laid it all out. talked for 15 plus minutes. This is your outside linebackers coach, special teams coordinator. He spent 15 minutes talking about special teams yesterday and laid it out. Why, how they had it set up, what happened, what are they doing in these meetings, what's going on in practice. And, I thought it was interesting. He was asked, is what he's seeing in practice squaring with what he's seeing in the games? And he proceeded to talk for about 2 minutes without really answering the question, which probably gives you your answer to that question. So I'm guessing it probably hasn't been real pretty in practice either. But yeah, it's to a point now where, what do? You don't, they're literally rotating punters in games. It's like a team that rotates a quarterback and can't get anything going on offense. They have 2 punters, so they don't have any. So yeah. It's incredible. I mean, we keep saying it's incredible, but it happens every single.
It is
week.
incredible.
It's stopped. I don't know. At some point, to me, it's like I was telling you guys, I didn't really even react when when Jalen Reed returned the punt last week to tie the game. It's like, oh well, there it is. I was watching from my couch. My wife looked at me and went, "Oh my God!" And I went, "It was probably coming at some point." Just because that's where we're at with that unit. We just expect the catastrophic to happen at this point.
You are hard bitten.
I am hard bitten. You're right. Very hard bitten.
You are very hard bitten.
I've been hardened by the world.
I know we all have. Not me as much as you, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're still a big softy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm way harder than you.
Yeah. Okay. Now hold the deal. Hold on here.
Hold on.
You guys watch more. Yeah. You guys watch more football than I do. How often do you see a rotation of punters? It strikes me as very odd.
I've seen it once this year. And it was in the game I watched last week.
Well, I mean, over the course of time, I can't remember it.
No, I can't either.
Just don't see it very often.
Well, and Dawson tried to explain it. One's right-footed, one's left-footed. The spin's different, and blah 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 blah. But read between the lines. They don't have a punter right now. They've got 2 guys that are struggling, so they're trying 2 different guys and seeing if they can figure out what works.
Hot take alert.
Mm-hmm.
If I were the head coach, the more I watch football, the more I think I probably could be a head coach. I would have it at least in the back of my mind, and at some point, some level of discussion with my staff, a third punter option. Like hey guys, is there anybody on campus? Is there somebody on the team that's punted before? Can we have an open tryout like this week to see what we got out there? Because these 2 guys, I don't know after that game what we're going to get. Are they going to cost us another one? Now, again, I hate to be harsh, but they cost them a game. I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
Are you just going to let that? Are you going to let that happen again?
Yeah, your margin for error is already 0. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Parker. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. The amazing thing too is that Will Pristup's 2 bad punts earlier in the game didn't even end up costing them because of how well the defense was playing. He hit a 7-yarder and a 28-yarder, and it's like I've seen
go outside and walk 7 steps right now. I want you to pause the podcast if you're listening to this.
Go outside
and take 7 steps, and that's how far a scholarship punter kicked the ball for Nebraska last week. Sorry, Parker. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I mean, you occasionally see this field goal kicking duty split. There are teams that have the short range field goal kicker and the long range field goal kicker. And that seems like sort of what Nebraska's trying to do with its punting. Like Cherney hasn't gotten comfortable with the, turning over a spiral. And so they're trying to use the rugby style to pin teams deep. He did it once. He killed one at the 9 against Michigan State.
He did.
He also had a 41-yarder that was a touchback. So he netted 21, which you might as well just go for it at that point.
Yeah.
So it's just not, it's just not the long and short of it is it's just not working. And then it goes beyond that too, where, they gave up a solid punt return on one of them. They gave up a 41-yard kick return. And no matter how you slice it, I asked Frost on Monday, hey, how much attention do you have to pay to the other guy when there's 2 returners like Michigan State had? How much do you have to pay attention to the guy who's away, from where you want to kick it? And he basically said none. You shouldn't have to, you got to know where the ball is in the air, but that guy shouldn't be involved in the play at all. But Dawson didn't say exactly that. He said, that, the guys were, even if the guys were too far up the field as it was, and there was no one. I mean, they had 5 guys that were past where Jaden Reed caught that ball when he caught it, and none of them were on his side of the hash marks. So it was a terrible punt, and they were also in terrible position to scramble to make the play. And it's not an equivocation. It's the vast majority of it is on the punt. The vast majority of it's on the punt, but then also they weren't able to rally and make up for the mistake.
On the positive side, what keeps Nebraska's train on the tracks, God, I hate when I do the cliche thing, but I'm just not that smart. What's keeping the train on the tracks is they're getting high level play at quarterback. I really love their receiver and tight end core. I love them. I just think they've done a tremendous job. And if you add Fedoni to that mix at some point, it's really strong.
And Oliver Martin probably before Fedoni.
And Oliver Martin. I mean, I think people need to give Lubick and Sean Beckton more credit because those two groups have gone from just okay or not okay, not even okay for the last couple of years to really good. I mean,
yeah.
Then the defenses, I mean, playing inspirational football now.
Inspirational. I like that. That's a good way of putting it. That was inspirational football.
Yeah, they rally to the ball and play for one another. That's what
It was old school. Yeah. It was old school.
They have great chemistry on that side of the ball, and Eric Chenander deserves a lot of credit. I mean, those guys came back to play. Super seniors came back to play with each other. Good, obviously, really good chemistry, and they've added some young pieces in there like Reimer, Reimer looks like a budding star to me right now.
Yeah, he's a missile.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And I was in the scrum talking to Luke Reimer in the hallway on Monday from Memorial Stadium. And, I thought it was an interesting quote. He said, we just need to pull the offense and the special teams up to where we are. We need to spread what we have to them. I don't know how you do that. That's the trick, I guess. But it was interesting hearing Luke say that. Like those guys, I think, realize that it's on them right now, both on the field and in practice and in the locker room or whatever. They've got to find a way to get those other two units up to, even if it's not on the same level, but at least in the same stadium as those two at this point. So yeah, it was just interesting to hear a young guy say that we've got to find a way to pull those guys along and get them to come with us.
Absolutely. That is it. I mean, think about the conversation. There's a side of the ball that we all thought would be the one that kind of lags behind the offense when Frost took over. Well, it's totally shifted. Now we're talking about how you want the offense to inherit this sort of culture and mindset as the defense. Again, big credit to Eric Chenander. Now here's the thing though, I don't think the offense has a bad mindset or a bad culture. I just think the offensive line's struggling. There's a lot of guys playing good football on that side of the ball. Austin Allen, come on. I mean, Austin Allen, Vokalek, Teray.
Omar Manning's emerged.
Yeah.
Adrian, obviously.
Yeah. Adrian's one of the best quarterbacks. I don't know. I guess you take Tagliavaiola over him at Maryland. I don't know who else. Did I pronounce that bad?
Tagovailoa?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's close enough. It's fine.
Who would you take over him? Don't tell me Tanner Morgan. I don't want to hear Tanner Morgan anymore. It's amazing to me that people will say Tanner Morgan. Really? Yeah. You take Tanner Morgan over Adrian Martinez?
We've had a similar discussion before, but put any of those guys behind Nebraska's offensive line. Let's see what they look like.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now put Adrian in Maryland's offense and see what it looks like, or put Adrian in Minnesota's offense and see what it looks
just put him behind. I mean, put him behind Ohio State's offensive line to say nothing of all the first rounders on the edge. I mean,
Yeah. And look, Adrian's missed some guys this year. There's no doubt about that. He missed a wide open guy in overtime. He's missed when it's easy to go back and parse through that stuff when you look at the film and things like that. He's missed some guys, and you got to be better there. But quarterbacks miss guys every week, and not everybody's getting guys. Tom Brady also isn't getting knocked on his keister 7 times a week, and constantly under pressure too. And
getting X-rays on his jaw in the first quarter, and then
getting X-rays on his jaw after like the third play of the game because he got flushed out of the pocket and got smacked. So there's that part of it too. And I've heard a little bit of that, and I get it, but at the same time, it's not all Adrian's fault there. Like if it was me, I'd probably be getting a little gun shy too if I had a bunch of guys running at me every other play.
The thing about the conversation on offense, I think we had this conversation last week, is it feels like they're close to breaking through for the simple fact that efficiency wise, per play wise, they're fine. Like they're not among the most explosive in the country, but they're against FBS competition. They're hovering around the top 30 in yards per play, and they're good on third down. Like there's some things that this offense is really pretty good at, but they're not good in the red zone. And I asked Matt Lubick on Tuesday, what's the hallmark of a team that's really good in the red zone? The first thing he said is you got to run the ball. You got to run the ball because things happen fast. The field gets compressed. It's easier to cover when you're not worried about getting beat over the top. So you've got to be able to run it. And Nebraska just hasn't been able to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, for as much of the positive as you can find in the offense, the 4 games they've played FBS teams, they scored 22, 28, 16, and 20 in overtime. So you just can't, even with a good defense. I mean, you're not going to win a lot of games that way, and they're all going to be close, and then mistakes get magnified. And that's sort of been the bugaboo is, you've got to put the ball in the end zone when you get into scoring range. And Nebraska hasn't done that nearly frequently enough through the first 5.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little Northwestern here. We'll give some predictions. Wildcats 2-2. They're kind of playing merry-go-round at quarterback right now. Hunter Johnson started the year. It's probably going to be Helinski Saturday. He came in against Ohio. Yeah. According to Louis Backer, who I talked to for the scout, he said the coaching staff has moved on from Hunter Johnson, and he had a meltdown against Duke. Basically, had 4 turnovers in the first half against Duke, and they just moved on. They've been able to run the ball a little bit. Ran for 373 last week against Ohio, but Ohio might be one of the worst teams in the country this year, so it's a little bit of a caveat there. But they've got a running back. They've got a power running game. They won't run it like that against Nebraska. Certainly, you wouldn't think. But it's kind of that typical Northwestern offense where it's not too terribly explosive. They don't make a ton of mistakes, but they have turned it over this year, which is a little uncharacteristic. And the defense. New defensive coordinator this year. It hasn't been an elite defense. Duke had 420 yards in the first half when they played each other a couple weeks ago. Michigan State put up. Say that again. At halftime, Duke, who's not great, had 420 yards of offense.
How did that happen?
It was a blowout at halftime, and Northwestern made it a game in the second half. They got back in it, but
Duke got 420 in the first half.
In the first half, and. They've just not been the same with the new defensive coordinator. So it's kind of the typical Northwestern slow start, but maybe not for the exact same reasons as it normally has been. The defense just hasn't been there. So we talked about a new offensive line. We talked about the weapons on offense. Maybe Nebraska is able to do something early on against this defense and build a little momentum, and we'll see. And we mentioned the special teams. They've got a great punt return game. They've got a veteran kicker in Charlie Kubander. So they've got some pieces there, but this isn't the same Northwestern team that we've seen maybe the last few years coming in here.
Can I give you a stat that I just had to double check to make sure it's right?
Yes.
Nebraska, obviously, we saw what Nebraska's run defense is capable of against Michigan State, but right now in all games, Nebraska is 13th in the Big Ten if you go by per carry against the run. They're giving up 4 yards a carry, which is 13th. The only team worse. It's the year of the defense in the Big Ten. I mean, Wisconsin's given up 1.01 yards per rush, and Iowa's at 2.3. So everyone has been good against the run this year. Nebraska's at 4, that's 13th. Northwestern's at 5.22, last in the league by more than a yard per carry. And they've given up 7 rushing touchdowns in 4 games compared to Nebraska, who's only given up 3 rushing touchdowns in 5 games. So now it's the worst run defense in the Big Ten if you go by the numbers.
It's the worst run defense in the Big Ten, and it's a defense that gave up 6 points to Ohio last week.
Yeah.
So think about that in the context of those other 3 games they played.
Hold on. Nebraska's given up 4 yards per carry, which that's as good as they've been in the Chenander era.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's as good as they've been.
Yeah.
4.0 is not a horrible number. That would get you usually in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten most years.
Most years, yeah.
Yeah, that'll get you in the middle, lower middle pack. Interesting.
Yeah, and with Northwestern, I mean, there's an apples to apples comparison, with the only caveat being that Northwestern got Michigan State week 1, but look at what Kenneth Walker did. I mean, there's a straight up comparison. Look at what Kenneth Walker did against Northwestern compared to what he did against Nebraska. I mean, he had 264 and 4 touchdowns against Northwestern. He had 51 yards against Nebraska.
Yeah.
Should we make some predictions here quick and then talk a little hoops? Get out of here.
Oh, I think that sounds wonderful.
I'll go first.
Okay.
I don't want to pick Nebraska. I don't. And I think if Northwestern, well, I mean, for all the reasons.
You're hard bitten.
Because I'm hard bitten. Yeah. I'm hard bitten. But if Northwestern had a vintage Northwestern defense, I probably wouldn't pick Nebraska. But I think they're going to be able to move the ball a little bit on the Wildcats. It's not going to be great. I think it's not going to be a fun game to watch. The mistakes are going to. I'm bitten. I'm down bad.
You're gonna be a peach on deadline.
I'm gonna be a real joy come Saturday night at about 9:30. I can tell you that.
I'm trying to sell tickets.
I'm not. I don't work for the university. I ain't trying to sell tickets. But no, I think Nebraska wins ugly. I think it's close because it's always close between these teams. So give me Nebraska 25-22.
Jeez, go ahead, Parker.
I'm also picking Nebraska, even though I might not pick them against anybody else in the Big Ten this week. But I am picking them. And I actually think that, I don't think it'll be a Picasso by any stretch of the imagination, unless you feel the way about cubism that I assume Sipple does. But I think
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Just
go ahead.
I'm just picking Nebraska 27-17.
Oh God, Parker, you hit my number exactly.
Damn.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot to add because I still have to. I don't know. I think it's good to be transparent about most things. I don't know a lot about Northwestern. I studied them in the preseason and have forgotten most of it. So I don't know. Based on what your guys are saying, it's scary. That punt return thing. Baz, do you know who that guy is? That their punt returner is?
They got a couple guys. They got a couple guys that return punts for them. So I don't know. So if they run a 2 safety punt return, look out. It could get crazy.
Well, here's the thing. We haven't mentioned it. We need to. I got calls from former players this week that wondered. They all wondered the exact same thing. What is Nebraska's mentality like? Are they okay? I mean, can they come back from this? Because that was would you say an emotional punch in the gut?
Yes.
And sometimes, I mean, we have to acknowledge that sometimes teams don't come back from games like that.
It's true.
Or they don't come back well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my answer to that is dudes, Stilley, Deontay Williams, on defense. Those guys come to mind. Even Reimer, a younger guy, who helped me out. Who's Damian Daniels, a captain. I don't think those guys. I mean, the corner Cam Taylor-Britt, both the safeties who I love. I don't think they'll let that unit go south. And I think Adrian Martinez is a fabulous leader, but I also think Cam Jurgens is a guy that wouldn't let the offense go south. And Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek.
You've named about all 22 starters so far.
Yeah,
you just want to keep going. You want to give a score at some.
No, but that's sort of my point. I think this is a team full of tough dudes that won't let it go south. So I'll say Nebraska will win the next 2. I'm going to predict 2 games today.
Wow.
Just like Tom Chattel, my counterpart at the World Herald, is calling them to win their next 2. I would say that too. And they'll start with 27-20 win on Saturday.
That could be
they'll
it
kick a
is.
late field goal. They'll kick a late field goal, Northwestern, to pad on a little bit.
You could put that in the bank for potential memoir title, Sipple, just like Tom Chattel.
Whoa.
Maybe we should
Whoa.
end it before I end Parker.
Whoa. Wow.
That crossed my mind, and I was like, I shouldn't say that. But you said that transparency is good in most cases.
I said in most
Support.
cases.
Oh, okay.
It's okay, Baz. It's okay.
No, it's not okay.
It's fine.
This is the abuse of the elderly, is what we're witnessing right now.
Elder abuse is occurring.
This is elder abuse.
Yeah, it's in public. It's public.
Get
elder
HR
abuse.
on the
It's
line.
public elder abuse.
My phone's ringing right now. It's human resources.
All right,
Yeah.
let's move on.
Yeah,
Husker
hoops. I want to hear about what's going on Friday night at Pinnacle.
Opening night with Husker Hoops, Friday night, Pinnacle Bank Arena, starts at 6:30. Men's team, women's team will both be introduced. Women's team with the short scrimmage. Men's team will also scrimmage. They'll throw down some sweet dunks, make some threes, blah, blah, blah. A concert by Sipple's favorite, G Herbo, afterwards, the Chicago-based rapper. Big recruiting weekend for Nebraska. They've got 6 official visitors coming in. Most notably Simeon Wilcher, an Omaha Bill U in the 2023 class, 2 top 10 talents essentially in the 2023 class. Also Chase Clemens in the 2023 class, highly thought of. Trey Green, then a couple 2022 guys, and Jamarcus Lawrence and Denham Dawson, who has a great name, Denham Dawson.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah.
fans in the building, free admission. You just have to go online and basically register for tickets, but they're free. So it's going to be fun to see the crowd back inside PBA. It's going to be fun to see this team under the lights for the first time. I've seen them in practice once and seen them, we'll see them again in practice on next Tuesday morning. But this will be the first time, in front of fans with this new roster and a roster with a lot of hope and a lot of hype. So it's going to be interesting to see. You're not going to be able to glean a whole lot from it. It's going to be about making those guys look good, but at the same time, it's going to be interesting to see some of those guys and how they react to fans in the building.
Every so often, I like to do this just to get the names out there. Who's your starting lineup, Bass?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot.
Just do it. Just do it. I know it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable.
Let me pull up the roster because I want to make sure I don't miss somebody obvious here. So
Yeah,
just a second.
that's what I would do.
Got to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Trey McGowan's, I think, is going to start. I think Bryce McGowan's is going to start, the 5-star freshman. I think Derek Walker, just because I think you go with experience in the post early on, is going to start. Mayan, I think, is a starter.
Okay, no, wait a
Then
second.
after
That's
that-
4. That's 4.
That's 4. I think
Don't you got to
Alonzo
start Verge? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you start Verge. I think that's and you run a basically a 3 or 4 out system around Walker. But again, there's a lot of guys who are going to play early in the year. CJ Wilcher, he fits in there somewhere, the Xavier transfer. Wilhelm Breidenbach. I didn't even mention Colby Webster, who played great at the end of last year, and started. Mentioned Derek. Trevor Lakes, where does he fit in? Keon Edwards, I think, is going to play a high-level recruit that transferred in. Eduardo Andre, haven't even mentioned him yet, a guy that made big strides last year. So I think you lean on your experience early in the year, but I think it's a lineup that's going to change quite a bit throughout the year. And I think it's going to look different at the end of the year than it looks at the beginning of the year.
Thank you, Bass.
You're welcome, Steve.
Nicely done.
Thank you. Hey, and this podcast was nicely done. We want to thank you guys for tuning in. Nebraska Northwestern, 6:30 p.m. Saturday night. We'll have all kinds of coverage on journalstar.com, huskerextra.com. Make sure you check it out. Until next time, talk to you soon.